Eva, I'm so excited to welcome you to my Core Connections podcast. I know we've chatted some in the past, and I just really am excited for you to share your story with my listeners and really get into importance for babies, sleep importance for moms, and how it relates to our overall health and well-being. So, yeah, I want you to start just tell everyone, because I know you either are or were a lawyer and now you
Mm.
teach moms how to get their babies to sleep. So I'm like,
Yeah,
wait, how did that happen? How did you transition? Like, that's a big shift.
it is. It is. Yes. So I'm Eva Klein and I am a certified infant and child sleep consultant. So I help exhausted moms of babies and young children get their little ones consistently sleeping 11 to 12 hours at night so they can be functioning humans again. And I got into this business because of my middle child. So I've got three kids. They are 10, 7, and 2. And basically what happened is I graduated law school. This was back in 2011, and I gave birth to my oldest daughter shortly after writing my last set of finals. That was fun. But this baby, this first baby of mine, was she was what I like to call my unicorn baby, right? She was this unbelievably easy, happy baby where she was content all the time. She was so easygoing, and naturally she was this gifted sleeper, and she made me really look good to be totally honest. And so I did what's called, I live in Toronto. And so here in Ontario, you have to do what's called articling, which is this paid internship that's part of the process of getting called to the bar. So I gave birth to her. I started my articling term when she was 5 months, completed that. So that's 10 months long. I got a job shortly after finishing my articling term, got called to the bar. Everything was wonderful, got pregnant with my second baby, had her. So, my oldest was about 2.5 by the time I had my second baby. And this baby, I knew literally from within, I don't know, 30 minutes of giving birth to her that it was going to be a different experience. I remember, I think I was already in, the postpartum ward at that point. They had taken me out of the delivery room. And I remember that, she was changed. I already started to try feeding her. She was actually, starting to latch really nicely, but she wouldn't let me put her down. And I remember going, I don't understand. Why is this baby crying? Because remember, I'm spoiled. I'm used to, this older baby of mine who only ever cried when there was something wrong. And this baby, on the other hand, needed to be held constantly. And I have this very clear memory in my head of my husband literally holding our 3-hour old newborn and just walking around the maternity ward with her, trying to get her to calm down, where I was going, oh shit. This is gonna be a different journey for us. This is not like my older one, because not only was she not, this happy go lucky unicorn baby, she was actually a very challenging baby. More difficult than average, just more needy, I would say. And so naturally, she did not sleep. And by the time she was 4.5 months old, she was waking me every 90 minutes all night long. And I thought I was going to die. So the context here is I was on maternity leave at the time. I don't mean to rub it into your American listeners, but here in Canada, we get 12 months of maternity leave. So that was a massive blessing, because if I was back in the office practicing law on 90-minute increments of sleep, I'm fairly certain I would have either gotten fired, I would have had, someone launch a claim against the Law Society against me, because my brain wasn't working. Like, I don't see how anyone can possibly use any aspect of their brain when they're deprived of sleep for so long. So that was the context in terms of the rest of the story. And so what I had to do was I had no choice but to open up some sleep books and figure out, what the hell was going on. I managed to make the situation a little bit more bearable. So rather than getting 90-minute stretches, I started getting like 3 to 4 hour stretches, which by the way is there's still tons and tons of room for improvement with a 4 to 5 month old, but it gave me a bit of breathing room and it made me have this eureka moment. And I thought, hey, you know what? Why don't I use up the rest of my maternity leave to get my certification to become a sleep consultant, just to launch a side business? That's all, just to launch a side hustle. It's going to be like a fun side job of mine where I get a new clients, I go buy a pair of shoes, like that kind of fun money. That's really what it was supposed to be. I get to help these exhausted moms get their little ones sleeping. Everybody wins. And so that was exactly what happened. And so by the time my daughter was 1 and my maternity leave was up, I went back to work. It happens to be my boss let me go back 3 days a week, which was fantastic. So it meant that I had some time to devote to this side business. And I saw very early on what kind of potential there was here to grow this, because here's what happens. And this is not going to come as too much of a surprise, right? You help a tired mom get her baby sleeping. Take a wild guess what she does. She goes and
Yeah.
tells
She tells
all her friends.
everyone else.
Guess what? Literally anybody that will listen to her, she's going to tell them, oh my gosh, my baby used to be a sleep monster. And now she's, a dream at night. And I have my life back. And so that was what happened. So all their friends started hiring me. And so before I knew it, this, fun little side business of mine was growing significantly more quickly than I ever imagined, which gave me another eureka moment where I said, I remember saying to my husband, gosh, you think I could grow this into something full time? And he kind of shrugged his shoulders and he said, why not? Why couldn't you? And at the time, so I'm loving this side business of mine. And then at the same time, my job, my boss was becoming kind of a jerk. And, my job was, not nearly as exciting as this was. And so then what happened was, is one day, this was 6 months into my return from maternity leave, my boss tells me he needs me back full time, that they're too busy in the office, that part time doesn't work anymore. And so that was where I was kind of, at a bit of a fork in the road. What do I do? I have this growing business, but now this part time arrangement isn't working anymore. And so I took a chance on myself and I said, hey, you know what? Let me go see what I can do with this side business of mine if I dedicate full time to it. Worst case scenario is I can always go back to law. My license isn't going anywhere. But that was, gosh, almost 7 years ago, and I haven't looked back. So here I am. That's kind of the story in a nutshell.
Wow, Eva, that's amazing. I love those stories. I kind of want to keep going on this a little bit just because I feel like, as moms or even women, you don't have to be a mom, right? And you go to college, you get your degree, you plan this path, right?
Yeah.
And then, maybe you're stuck in it, or maybe you're like, oh, I have this idea to do something else, but I don't know how to do it. I don't know where to start. And, I think that so many times we can get stuck in what we feel like we have to be doing, even though it's
Yeah.
not really what we want to be doing because of fear. And I talk about that, because it's like fear is such a thing that really holds us back from living really thriving in our life and doing, serving our purpose or whatever it may be. And not, and everyone isn't, destined to run their own business. But I know there's women out there listening who, maybe this conversation will inspire one woman or one mom to, take that leap of faith. So that's why I was like, I want to
Totally.
go a little bit in this. So yeah. So what were there fears and stuff that came up for you? Because you make it sound like, and I know hindsight's 2020, right?
Oh,
Because it worked out. But
yeah,
at the
I lost
time,
sleep for about a month. Like, let's
okay,
just let's just put this out there. Like,
okay,
it's not as if I was like, "Oh, okay, so like I'll just quit my law job, my cushy government job with like, benefits and a pension and all these like wonderful benefits, to go and yeah, go after this side business of mine. No, it was absolutely frightening because I am a very type A personality where I was like, I was going to be the one to decide when I was going to quit my job. Like this was not the plan. It wasn't, my boss wasn't supposed to be the one to put this part-time working arrangement on hold. I was going to be the one to decide, okay, my business is big enough and I'm now going to quit my job. Though, if I'm going to be totally honest with myself, would that day have ever actually come? I don't know, because that's a really, really scary thing to do. And so, a part of me really thinks that like God just had to orchestrate this for me because, if I'm going to be honest, like for me to actually take that plunge and quit my job, I don't know if I would have ever had the guts to do it. But no, I was absolutely beside myself. Beside myself. I left work early. I was so hysterical because I didn't know what to do. I felt totally, totally stuck. And I'll tell you a really big blessing. I remember it was first thing in the morning. My boss could see that I was really, beside myself about it. So he let me go home. And I'm very extroverted, right? So when this sort of thing happens, like I need support from my people. I needed my husband, I needed my mom. My mom was working at the time. She wasn't retired yet. She wasn't able to help, she wasn't able to, talk very much. But thankfully, my husband was actually off from work at the time because he was starting a new job like the next week. And so he had like a 1 or 2 week period of time, in between his jobs. And so he was home. So it meant that I could call him and literally be hysterical to him, what do I do, and have him there supporting me. He would normally not be able to just take a quick, a call from me in the middle of the day. He works in finance. He's dealing with like the stock market. He would be like, Sorry, I have to go and make a few trades. I'll call you back in, 4 hours. So that was a massive, massive blessing where, as scary as it was, we talked it through, the option of going back to work full time, versus continuing, knowing where my business was at. And it was actually very clear to the both of us, very, very clear that sticking with that particular job was not, it didn't make sense at the time. My girls were 3 and 1. My husband had a very demanding job in the financial sector. And the flexibility that I was originally being offered for my particular job to make everything work was just not available to me anymore. And so the calculation at this time wasn't, I'm just going to focus on my business. It really was, I'm going to focus on my business, but I'll also look for another part time job as well. And it happens to be that I had a few other interviews in other places that were similar to where, I was working. I was working in an academic hospital, um, negotiating the hospital's clinical trial agreements. And so I had that area of expertise. And so I did actually have a couple other interviews elsewhere. But you see, then what happened was once I had the opportunity to devote full days to my business, as opposed to kind of splitting my time and attention between my business and my job, that was really what allowed my business to really, really grow, where by the time a job offer came around from another place, I didn't have time for it. I was full. I was booked. I had like a full load of clients. And at the time, given that my girls were still so young and working from home allowed me that flexibility, then it was kind of like, okay, I'm in this position right now. This arrangement really works well. Let's see where it takes me from there. And I say this so easily, as if it was like as if I'm this, easygoing type B person, like go with the flow. I'm like the total opposite of that. So, I feel like but the whole experience, it made me into a bit of it brought out the type B in me, which I think I really needed,
Mhm.
because it really was one of those like wait and see situations. Like, let's see what happens. Here's this unbelievable opportunity for me to potentially grow a business that allows me to work from home, allows me flexibility, allows me to do something so unbelievably rewarding, far more rewarding than anything in law can possibly provide me. No offense to any lawyer, any fellow lawyers that are listening in, you're all wonderful, but I mean, let's call a spade a spade. I get to help exhausted families make drastic, massive changes to their quality of life in a very short period of time. I can't think of anything more rewarding than that. And so that was where it was kind of like, all right, let's see where this goes. And then it was another few months where my coaching business just built up further, making me go, I'm not looking back. I'm not going back to law. Why would I do that? This is so much more amazing. So, yes, there was absolutely lots and lots of lost sleep over it. I found myself like wide awake in bed at night, thinking through, like, okay, if I want to stick with this job, what's this going to look like? And how would it work with carpooling the kids to school and then, aftercare? And then, I'm figuring out, all the extra costs in my mind of like, what, extra childcare that we would need. And, when would I be able to work on my business? And just literally talking through absolutely everything to myself, because that's what I have to do. I have to like talk out loud for me to actually think. And as I said, it was so unbelievably clear that that specific thing just didn't make sense for me. But at the same time, it didn't take away from the fact that it was really freaking frightening at the
Mm.
same time,
Yeah.
because it wasn't my plan.
Yeah.
Wasn't my plan. It was so different than what I had, imagined for myself. But again, I just had to learn to bring out that type B in me, because I think that if I had been so focused on like, well, what if this doesn't work out? And then what am I going to do? And then as a result, be too scared and hold myself back. Um, then I probably wouldn't have been where I am today. And I think that we type A's, like we like to poke fun at type B personalities a lot, but let's be real here. Being a type B sometimes really has its perks, because it allows you to take risks that I think type A's would be too they'd be too scared to take. It doesn't feel safe enough, it doesn't feel predictable enough. And so they're just going to do what feels safe and comfortable. But it's the type Bs that sometimes, really end up winning, because they're the ones taking the risks. So I had to kind of find that in me to end up where I am today.
I love that you said, like, you had to find it in you because it wasn't your natural innate sense, right?
Not
And
at all.
I think that's such a big thing, right? And whether it's, a business decision or other decisions in life, right? That we can get stuck in and like let our conscious logical brain like constantly drive us
Totally.
when so many times that's actually getting in our way. Like there, don't get me wrong, like we need to obviously have that logical brain to
Yeah.
go over things like financially, is this going to work? Is, like
Think through
what's,
the
yeah,
decisions. Yeah,
right. But what
100%.
is that like intuitive sense of like, what if this really works? Right. Instead of the
Mhm.
what if it doesn't work? I mean, you can go there, but many times, like you said, if something doesn't work and you try it, at least you tried it. Right.
Right.
And if you like,
Exactly.
I can go get another law job. And so I think that,
Exactly.
yeah, I just
I
always,
was like, if this doesn't work out, I had to think through, like, what is the worst case scenario? Am I going to land up homeless on the street living out of my car? No, no, that's not going to happen. Even though your brain likes to go there sometimes, that's not actually going to happen. Worst case scenario, what's going to happen? I'll have to look for another job. And job hunting sucks. It does. And going for all the interviews and blah blah blah, it absolutely sucks. It's an economy where it's not like law firms are rolling out the red carpet for people. I get that. Um but I also knew that eventually, if I needed to go back to the 9 to 5 corporate world, I would be able to do that. And so that gave me the that kind of stable base that I needed to say, "Hey, let me go explore this. Let me go explore these like very uncharted waters and see where it takes me." It's very unfamiliar to me because I come from a family of professionals. I come from a family of doctors, lawyers, accountants, teachers, in other words, like professions that involve you going to we call it university here, so college, university, getting a post-secondary education and then getting those degrees to get you that financial stability, right? That's what pretty much everybody in my immediate and extended family has done. Nobody, not one person in my immediate or extended family is an entrepreneur, is a business owner. Um, I don't consider, and I'm not considering like a dentist, yes, a dentist, like my grandfather was a dentist. Yes, he ran his own practice, but it's different, because he was a professional, right? He was a professional that had his own practice. So I think it's still very different than like being an entrepreneur like I am. So it was very, very, very unfamiliar. So I'm telling you, some of my friends thought that I was nuts. Like, are you really, Eva? Is that what you're doing? So you're like, and even my mom's friends who are also, doctors, lawyers, accountants. So you're not going back to law. You're just leaving law, really? And it was like, yeah, for now, that's what's happening. And you could see their jaws, literally dropping like all the way down to the floor. Like, hold on, let me just pick my jaw right back up here because this is so uncommon, like completely out of the ordinary. But it really made sense. As crazy as it sounds, it made perfect sense. It wasn't a hard decision. It was a frightening situation, but it wasn't a difficult decision to make.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. Thank you for sharing your story. I think that's so fun and exciting and how rewarding, right? To
Yeah.
be doing what you are doing. So let's shift gears and get into that because I definitely want to make sure we have time to talk about that today because
Yes.
everyone who listen to my podcasts, or is a student of mine knows that like we know sleep is important. We know that so many things correlate to our overall health, and sleep is one that gets so neglected. Mom or no mom, I think it gets neglected because, women are working, so many
Mhm.
hours in a day and maybe not taking enough time for themselves. And then obviously moms in particular, and especially during, that newborn toddler stage. And I think this is still a great conversation to have for, because this is what I see is bad habits were created, right? Bad sleeping habits for mom when the kids were little,
Yeah.
and she hasn't ever recovered from
Yeah.
them. So that's why I think this is so important. What I know you're going to share with everybody. So let's go there. So Eva, like what are some of your actually let me ask you this. Like what are some of the common like things that you see that we do wrong trying to get babies to sleep? Because I've heard you say this, and I was like, oh, I think I did all of them. And I didn't know any
Yeah.
different. I was like, I needed you. But my oldest is
Right.
14. I needed you 14 years ago when she was a horrible, horrible sleeper.
Well, I'll tell you this before we get into the nitty-gritty. I
Yeah.
mean, I find that a very common um thought, or I guess, mindset block that a lot of moms have is that they think that this entire conversation is selfish. They
Mm,
think that now that they have a baby, they don't matter anymore. Their needs don't matter. Now, absolutely everything needs to revolve around their baby, because they're now a doormat. And to talk about your own needs when you have a baby, what's wrong with you? And I can't tell you how enraged I get when I hear that messaging. I think it's very toxic, to be honest, because um moms do matter, right? We're
absolutely.
still human. just because you have a baby who, by the way, you would do anything for, it doesn't mean that you suddenly don't matter either. Like multiple truths can exist, can coexist. Like you can have a baby that means the world to you that you would do anything for. And at the same time, you have needs and you have wants because you're still a human being. Right. And I think the difference between, let's say somebody who struggles with sleep who doesn't have kids versus someone who is struggling with sleep because their little one is waking them up all night long is that the first example is looked at as a problem. Like, oh, you poor thing. Like, you haven't been sleeping at night. That's terrible. You need your sleep. You should go to the doctor. You should go look into that. But then you throw a baby into the picture and it's like, well, what did you expect? You
It's
became a
normal.
mom. This is what you're
Yeah.
supposed to do. This is how it's supposed to be. Like, suck it up, buttercup. And and then so it's like suddenly the support and the emphasis on moms getting sleep is just not only does it go out the window, in fact, some moms are even told you should enjoy it. Enjoy getting woken up with your little one. Enjoy snuggling with your baby in bed all night long. Now, if you happen to actually enjoy that, that's fine. You do you. But the vast majority of humans, including young moms, do not enjoy getting woken up by their little ones all night long. In fact, that is sleep deprivation is sleep deprivation, whether or not it's caused by a child or whether it's caused by, poor sleep hygiene that has nothing to do with your kids. It doesn't take away from the fact that young moms still need sleep too. And so it puts this unbelievably large amount of mom guilt on a mom when you tell her you need to not only should you suck it up, but you should enjoy it. And if you don't enjoy waking up with your baby all night long, then there must be something wrong with you. You must not be a good mom. That's the ultimate message that is being sent. And it does so much harm because when mom isn't sleeping, everyone suffers, including her. Everybody does. Everything just falls apart when mom is chronically sleep deprived. And baby benefits hugely from mom being a well-rested functioning human, and the problem is that I think maternal mental health should be the center of this discussion. That's not. And as a result of that, you get a lot of this, toxic messaging of, well, you don't matter, and it's all about your baby, and it's all about what your baby needs, and it's all about what your baby wants. And the maternal mental health aspect, which, by the way, baby needs as well. Baby benefits hugely when mom's mental health is thriving. That piece gets totally ignored. And so I think it's like important to kind of frame the conversation before we delve into this to, let's remember here that we're talking from that angle here, that like you matter, your mental health matters. If you're not sleeping properly at night, a human natural response is to wake up and feel like garbage and barely recognize yourself, because that's what chronic sleep deprivation does. And so I think that that's, a mistake that a lot of parents make, is that they don't prioritize their needs and recognize how much it benefits their entire family unit. Do you get what I mean?
Absolutely. No, I appreciate you sharing all of that. I actually kind of want to keep going on this. So I have a question.
Mhm.
Um, and I feel like you probably know something in this realm of like, okay, if we start talking like postpartum depression and
Yeah.
anxiety, I'm guessing we're going to see a huge correlation between sleep deprivation and that as well. I mean, we know just with health in general, right?
Yeah.
Sleep is one of the first things. I'm like, if your sleep is messy, we gotta fix your sleep. But of course, right?
Yes.
If baby's not sleeping, that's the wake
Totally.
up alarm during the night for moms. So I mean, again, like you said, it's not being talked about. And
Right.
so, when instead it's like, okay, well, so many women deal with what you would classify, I guess, as some form of postpartum depression, which is a very umbrella term. And obviously, we're not here
Mhm.
to like talk about diagnosis or anything like that. Um, but I think also to bring awareness because again, it's looking at, kind of what is the root cause of why you feel the way you do. And yeah, it can obviously be hormones and all that kind of stuff too, but
Mhm.
this is such a big part. Like when you start talking about again healing the body, sleep
Yes.
is like the number one thing because your
Number 1.
body has to recover. That's the
Yeah.
time your brain. That's the time your brain. I got to remember this word. I gotta remember what that big word is. Where it's like brainwashing is what they call it, right? Like so,
Mm.
you when you sleep at night and your brain like does a wash, right? So it's
Yeah.
getting rid of the bad stuff. And if you're not getting good quality sleep, we know that's not happening.
Yeah.
And so I think that again, I don't know, just I like connecting the dots to all the
No,
pieces,
totally. So,
versus like
look, here's what I'll
segmenting.
say. I mean, I am not a psychotherapist. I'm not a social worker. I don't have that training, but I did have someone on my podcast who is a registered psychologist. Her name is Dr. Jill Satin, and she has a clinic here in Toronto that specializes in supporting women in the perinatal mental health sphere. So, pregnancy, prenatal, postpartum health. And I had her on my podcast to, talk about this specific topic of conversation. And she spoke about how in her clinic, in her work, anytime she is working with a mom who is struggling with either postpartum depression or postpartum anxiety, one of the first things that she asks them is about sleep. How is your little one sleeping? How are you sleeping? 9.5 out of 10 times, the answer is my sleep is garbage. And then what she does 100% of the time is she tells them to go and work with a sleep consultant. She's a psychologist. Why? Because of what you just said, where if somebody is struggling and they are not sleeping on top of that, then she said, like, we're going to hit a brick wall in our work together very early on because there is minimal, if any, progress that you can make through therapy and other, forms of counseling and support if your body is being deprived of sleep. And so then what ends up happening, she was saying, one of two things ends up happening when you do get your little one sleeping. Number one, she said some people don't actually end up needing her help anymore because now that they're not sleep deprived,
That's
they're
amazing.
the symptoms that they were experiencing of depression and anxiety went away. The other half of the time, somebody is dealing with, true clinical depression or anxiety, which absolutely happens. It's very common. But then what it means is that they can actually do the work. They can actually do the work and be able to focus on themselves and get results through counseling, through other forms of self care. Because you see, and I'm sure you see this as well. With your people when you're dealing with crappy sleep. It ends up leading you down this vicious, awful spiral where you wake up, you feel like you got hit by a truck, you really want to take care of yourself, but you don't have an ounce of energy in you to make that chicken stir fry for dinner. And so instead, you eat, frozen pizza. By the way, I'm not knocking frozen pizza, but if you're eating it on a regular basis, you're going to feel like garbage even more, right? And then if you wanted to do that 30-minute Pilates class, you're not going to have the energy to do that either because your sleep is garbage. And so instead, you just sit on the couch and watch Netflix. Nothing wrong with sitting on the couch and watching Netflix, but it's everything needs to be balanced, right? And if you don't have the energy to do things that make you feel good, then it perpetuates that vicious cycle and it can really prevent you from getting out of it so that you can start feeling good and taking care of yourself versus when you finally wake up feeling like a functioning human, then it means, hey, you know what? I've got the energy to do things that make me feel good, that I can do to take care of myself. I can make myself that chicken stir fry. I can hop on Erica's 30-minute, core Pilates class. And I can even go out for an hour with one of my friends for coffee and actually enjoy myself. And then from there, that's when you get into this wonderful cycle of feeling great because you're taking care of yourself. And then it's like the more you take care of yourself, the more great you feel. And then you want to take care of yourself more. And then it's this wonderful cycle that you can find yourself in. But it all starts with the sleep piece. And so it's huge. And this is, again, this is not me speaking. Like I've spoken with people that have far more letters next to their name than I do, who all completely 100% agree that sleep is a massive piece of that maternal mental health piece, regardless of whether or not you struggle with clinical anxiety or depression, or if you are simply experiencing symptoms of it because you're so damn sleep deprived, which, by the way, was me. I was in that second category with my middle child, where she was waking me every 90 minutes all night long. I didn't recognize myself. I was like a shadow of myself. I was miserable all the time. The glass was constantly half empty. I was, barking at my husband for like literally nothing, losing my mind at my toddler. Like it was just awful, awful, awful. And so I went to my family doctor to go and talk to him because I thought, gosh, do I have postpartum anxiety? Is that what's happening here? And thankfully he's a very good doctor. I think that some doctors would have just, thrown Zoloft at me and said, okay, go have a good day. Um, Nothing wrong with Zoloft at all, but it's not what I needed, because when he first asked me and said, do what's your sleep like? And I said, oh, it's terrible. And he said, look, go get your baby sleeping, go open the books, go hire someone, go do what you need to do. If you're still feeling the way that you're feeling once your baby is sleeping, then come back to me and we'll talk. And then we'll talk about, next steps in terms of, counseling, medication, etc. I did not have to go to that next step because all I needed was sleep. Once I started getting sleep, then I was no longer depressed. Then I was no longer anxious. Then it was like I was back to being my normal self. I don't know if you can relate to any of that as well.
Oh, absolutely. Like May 1st was a horrible sleeper. And I didn't know like any, I mean, I knew sleep was important, obviously. But, trying to, figure out what to do to get her to sleep. The girl had to be constantly moving. Sounds kind of a lot like your middle one. It was like she just had to move with her. Luckily, my middle was a much better sleeper. And then my third, I'm like, at that point, I don't even remember because I think I was so sleep deprived by the time she came that I was like, you just kind of roll, you just kind of learn how to roll with life. And I swear it took me, gosh, after my kids actually started all really sleeping through the night on a regular basis, I swear it took me like years to feel like I was caught up. And now,
Yeah.
and I've admitted this before, I did not have the best sleep habits because I'm like a go-getter and like I'd put my kids to bed and then I would work in the evening. My husband was a fireman, so he was gone a lot of nights. So I was like, oh, well, kids are in bed. I'm going to go work and run my business for 3, 4 hours and stay up way too late, which I do not recommend anyone do, by the way,
Right.
ever. I've stopped doing that because it's not good sleep habits, right? So there's definitely, I mean, I did a lot of things so wrong just with my own habits, and I knew it was important. But you're younger and you're like, I want to do all this stuff and get it all in, and so. But I think it also comes to a place where when you really recognize like I need to prioritize myself, and how good or how bad do you feel. So many times I think we don't realize how tired we really are or how bad we feel
Yeah.
because the brain fog sets in. It's just like, but stop to recognize, right, the amount of coffee you feel like you have to drink. And my
Totally.
big gauge for clients is I'm like, do you need that like 3 o'clock coffee? Like if you want to have one time to from time to time just because you like to drink coffee, one, have decaf, but two, if you feel like you're relying on caffeine in the morning and relying on caffeine in the afternoon to like get you through the day, that's a
Yeah.
really big red flag that your sleep is really messed up and you're
Yeah.
really stressed out, because that's like there's a huge correlation. And I have an episode where I talked about the HPA axis because we talk about adrenal exhaustion and fatigue and all that, but it's actually more about our brain. And so that's where like there's a huge correlation in sleep deprivation and the stress that it's causing on your body. And we all ultimately know like stress is at the root of a lot of disease and dysfunction. So I think that's where we really
Yeah.
start to see like sleep as a powerhouse because
Yeah.
of if we're not sleeping, it's a big added stressor to our
Totally.
body. So like you cannot out sleep stress. You can't out supplement stress. You can't out
Yeah.
eat a good diet of stress. You know what I mean? So like it
Yeah.
ultimately comes down to getting all that stuff in balance. And it's not about perfection. It's
No.
about like, baby steps, moving in the right direction.
Totally. Yeah. No, just recognizing that the goal here is not to be Superwoman,
Yeah.
because Superwoman, let's remember, she doesn't exist. She's a made up superhero that I think has set the bar way too high for too many people. Or maybe we can all think of like that one mom who might appear to resemble Superwoman, and that she doesn't need very much sleep, and she sleeps 4 hours a night, and she has this powerhouse job, and she's running carpool, and she's doing and she's doing parent council at school, and she's making meals for new moms, and is just doing everything. So there's two possibilities there. So like number one is she's overworking herself and she's having a breakdown behind closed doors. That's a real possibility, and so that's not a model that you want to be looking up to. The second possibility is, on very, very rare occasions, there are those people who legitimately are fine on 4 to 5 hours of sleep a night. There is actually this very rare genetic mutation that can run in some families that actually literally allow people to function on minimal sleep. But when I say that that is an exception, that is, we're talking like a real, like probably 1%, if anything, of the population. I don't have exact numbers, but now that I'm talking this through, I kind of want to go and Google how
No,
common
I think it's
that
really
mutation
I think
is.
it's
It's
really
not
less
very
common.
it's extremely rare. But regardless, Superwoman is not someone that we want to try to replicate, because we're going to end up running ourselves ragged, and then we are no good to anybody when we're not taking care of ourselves, and that includes getting a proper night's sleep. I mean, you go to the doctor for just about anything, any health concern of any kind, they're always going to ask you, and how are you sleeping? Always. I mean, any good doctor is going to say, oh, you're having aches and pains. Oh, you're feeling, lethargic. Oh, this is hurting. This is happening. They're almost always going to be asking you what your sleep is like, because if your sleep is garbage, then that's almost always one of the first things that they're going to be looking at.
Yeah, it's so important. Okay, can we move in and talk about a couple of the like common things? You don't have to go through all of them, but what are like the
Yeah.
top two
Hmm.
common things that you see that babies do, but we're told, oh, that's normal baby sleep
Right.
habits.
So, I mean, a really common mistake that I find that moms make is that they're not aiming, or they don't try to put their little ones down completely 100% awake. And that can end up causing so many issues in the sleep department, because when you have a baby that's at least 4 months of age and they need help falling asleep, they need to be rocked, they need to be fed, they have to be patted, they need to be held, or they need you to like lie down next to them until they fall asleep. That is a recipe for lots of unnecessary night wakings, because babies are cycling in and out of deep and light sleep just like adults. And so at the end of their sleep cycle, which by the way is only 45 minutes long, it means that there is a very high likelihood that that baby is going to wake up at the end of that sleep cycle, not because they're done sleeping, not because they're hungry or hot or cold or scared or something is wrong. They need you to come back and help them go back to sleep. And so so my middle child was waking me every 90 minutes all night long. 90 is not a coincidence here. It was every other sleep cycle. So she would manage to put herself back to sleep, every other sleep cycle. But then every other sleep cycle, she would wake up and need me to come back and put that damn pacifier back in her mouth again so that she could go right back to sleep, only for it to fall out and for her to realize 90 minutes later that she needs me to come and help her again. And so that's something that can get people into a lot of trouble. Now, I want to emphasize that I'm not the kind of person to go around preaching like you must sleep train your baby, no matter what, because I know there's lots of families out there who do feed their little ones to sleep and they do bed share with them and they have some kind of arrangement and it works. Like it actually really truly works where they're getting sleep and baby's getting sleep, and that's fantastic. But there's more than enough families out there where that sort of situation doesn't work, and they're waking up too many times a night that it's just not working. And so one of the things that we really have to be tackling is teaching baby how to sleep independently so that they can learn to keep themselves asleep either throughout the night or until they're actually waking up because they're hungry. A 4-month old is likely going to be waking up once a night still to eat. Not always, some can get through the night, but I would say the majority are still waking up and eating once. But there's a very big difference between a 4-month old waking up and eating once versus waking up 5 times, 6 times. There's a very, very big difference. So
Mhm.
that I would say is like a huge situation that we're almost always addressing when we're dealing with a baby that is, or a toddler or a preschooler who is either waking up at night at all to begin with or waking up more frequently than necessary.
Okay, so then can you share with everybody? So, okay, because this is, I feel like, was my situation, especially with my first. I know I did it all wrong, right? Holding her till she was asleep or about asleep and putting her down, and then she'd cry and pick her back up. So, but I know there's the whole, like, I feel like at one point we finally, decided to, like, try to, I guess, let her cry it out when she was like 6 or 9 months, or I don't know how old she was. She was a little older. She wasn't like a newborn. And like that's really hard too.
Yeah.
So, but I feel like probably as it goes on longer and longer, that gets harder and harder versus like if you start to do this with a newborn and actually like put them down before they start to get sleepy so they'll actually soothe themselves to sleep. I don't know, can you like explain that a little bit more,
Yeah.
like what to do? Because I know I did that all wrong.
Right, right. Well, here's, one thing that I definitely just want to emphasize, and that's that if you don't want to be doing cry it out, which is basically when you put your little one in the crib, you say goodnight and you leave the room and you don't go back in, you don't have to do that. That's not the only option here. I'm not against it, but I do find that for a lot of families, it is really, really hard. And they they feel kind of stuck because on the one hand, they don't want to do cry it out. On the other hand, they don't just want to wait it out either, for that magical day to arrive that their little one, starts to sleep. And so they're looking for a happy medium. And there absolutely is a happy medium where there are approaches that you can take that allow you to intervene and allow you to be there in a supportive manner so that your little one can learn how to sleep like a champ, but doesn't have to do that completely 100% alone if that's outside of your comfort zone. Um, that being said, is it, people always ask me, when's the right time to be tackling this? And I think there's two answers to that. So, answer number one is when you are ready. And then answer number two is the earlier the better. So there, which sounds like one big contradiction, but like bear with me here so I can kind of explain. So the first answer, which is when you're ready, I 100% believe with every fiber of my being that the family needs to be ready to be making these changes, right? And even though it might be easier to make changes with a younger baby than with an older baby, it still needs to be the right time. There's enough families that reach out to me that work with me who say, no, you know what? Like, I wasn't ready because of XYZ. This was happening, that was happening. And I just wasn't ready to make these changes until now. Now being their little one is a year, 18 months, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. It's never too late, right? I just want to emphasize that it's never, ever, ever too late. That being said, is it technically a little bit more straightforward when the little ones are younger? Yeah, 100%. Because the 2-year olds have the ability to tantrum like champions. They're throwing temper tantrums. The 4-month olds are not, right? So it's obviously a little bit more straightforward in that sense, but your comfort level and your level for readiness has to trump your little one's age. Like, I'd rather be working with a family where the little one is older, but the parents are ready, over working with a family where the baby is younger, but the parents are going, no, I can't do this, right? Like, I'm not ready for this. I just kind of want to, because then in that situation, I'm not able to help them. And that's okay, right? Because as I said, it needs to be this sort of thing is not for every single family at any given moment. For me personally, with my middle child especially, I was like literally counting down the days until she was 16 weeks before I could sleep train her. And I do get lots of families, in that boat as well. But then there are just as many that are not reaching out at 4 months. They're reaching out at 8 months or 12 months or 18 months or 2 years. And it's equally fixable. But yes, there is absolutely what that you can do with your younger little newborns, like even once a day to, try putting them down, not 100% asleep, but like try putting them down even half awake once a day so that they can get used to doing, some of the work falling asleep by themselves. That's what I did with my son, who's my youngest, but he was the first baby that I had as a sleep professional. I had been doing this for about 5 years by the time that he was born. So I had this like little guinea pig, to be able to actually experiment with and like use everything that I've been teaching other people like on my own kid, which was kind of cool. And then it meant that by the time he was 6 weeks old, I had him sleeping like 8-hour stretches, which was really,
That's
really amazing
amazing.
and
That's
a game
amazing.
changer, I would say.
Yeah.
And yeah, and my friends all laugh at me that like I was putting him down, awake once a day, like in the delivery room. He was, 5 minutes old okay, not actually, but you know what I mean? Like I was really, really focused on that just once a day. And it really made a difference in the grand scheme of things.
Such great advice. So it's amazing. And I know it can be a game changer when your kiddos start to sleep. So it's so, so important. So, Eva, thank you so much for sharing all of this. Do you have any last, like, a simple tip or anything that you want to share with everyone listening?
Yeah. So I mean, I'll just mention a couple of things. So, number one is overtiredness is also a really, really big thing. So pay very close attention to your little one's daytime schedule, right? It's important to make sure that your little one is napping when they need to be napping and sleeping when they need to be sleeping. Otherwise, they get overtired, and overtiredness causes shitty sleep. That's just what happens. And by the way, that applies to adults as well. When we go to sleep too late, it also means that we're just going to be wired, our cortisol levels are higher, and it's going to make it much, much harder for us to settle and sleep restfully at night as well. Your babies, your toddlers, your preschoolers are no different. So, remember that what goes on during the day directly impacts what happens at night. And then the second thing I would say is don't underestimate what your little one can do. I know that so many people just like to say, "Ugh, my kid's just not a sleeper. Nah, I'll sleep when he's 18. I'll sleep when he's in college," and they just kind of write it off because yeah, maybe their parents, their in-laws are telling them like, "Oh, well, you weren't a sleeper, and so I guess that means that this is payback. Now your kid's not a sleeper." Ha ha ha. Which okay, funny, but like not actually funny. But really what it means is that your strong-willed, more high needs kid just needs a little bit more help to get there. But it doesn't mean that they can't figure out how to sleep as well as their easygoing counterparts can. And I can say this very confidently, having helped thousands of families to date, like well over 2,000 families. I see it myself. Like, this is what I do. Strong willed, high needs, difficult babies are my zone of genius. Like, that is my specialty. I get those. We get those babies sleeping, even yours. Whoever's listening in, she's going, like, yeah, but not mine. Mine's different. Like, no, I'm telling you, there's lots of you that are thinking, oh, my baby is different. I'm talking to each and every one of you. As long as they're healthy, they're not different. They're different in that they're their own unique being, but they're not different in that they can absolutely figure out how to sleep like champs. So don't underestimate that, what they can do. And don't underestimate how important it is to tackle this head on so that you can take control of your health and your physical and emotional well-being, because you owe that to yourself, and your entire family benefits from you being at your best.
Absolutely. So well said, Eva. I love it. Thank you so much. Can you just share with everybody where they can either reach out to you or find out more information about what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, my website is mysleepingbaby.com. You can find me on Instagram at mysleepingbaby, and I've got a free masterclass that Eric and I did a little while ago that you can check out. That will teach you how you can get your little one consistently sleeping through the night. So, if you want a head start on getting that wickedly awesome sleep so that you can finally feel like a functioning human again, definitely check out that masterclass.
Yep, and I will post that in the show notes. So it's so great. You ladies will continue to learn so much more from Eva during that class. I loved it. I learned a lot. I was like, I needed this years and years ago. But anyway,
Better late than never, right?
better late than never. Well, Eva, thank you so much. It was so great to see you again. And thank you so much for just sharing so many great words of wisdom with everybody.
Thank you so much for having me. This was great.